The silence that has defined the British monarchy for centuries has finally been shattered. And it wasn't broken by a tabloid or a leaked memoir. It was broken by the man who will one day wear the crown. Prince William has just made a statement that didn't just shake the palace walls. It effectively declared a civil war within the royal family. His words were precise, cold, and carried the full weight of a king in waiting. He has delivered an ultimatum that puts his brother Harry and Meghan Markle in a position from which there is no easy escape. Provide undeniable medical proof that Meghan personally gave birth to their son Archie, or watch as the child is stripped of every royal title, every form of royal support, and his entire place in the line of succession. This is no longer just a family argument. This is a legal and constitutional crisis that has brought the British throne to the very edge of a precipice. And the question the world is asking is no longer just what happened, but what are they so desperately afraid of revealing? Don't forget to subscribe to Royal Report Daily and hit that notification bell so you never miss a single update. For years, the royal family lived by its famous code: never complain, never explain. They ignored the whispers, the rumors, and the growing questions that suggested things were not quite what they seemed during the spring of 2019. But even the strongest palace walls eventually develop cracks. And for 2 weeks in early 2026, those walls were being watched very carefully. A middle-aged man with sharp eyes and a weathered trench coat became a permanent fixture outside the Kensington Palace gates. Night after night, as the London fog settled over the cobblestones, this man stood in silence. Security initially dismissed him as just another obsessed follower. But this was no fan. This was Tom Bower, the veteran investigative journalist whose name alone makes the most powerful people in Britain genuinely nervous. He didn't shout. He didn't hold a sign. He simply waited. And every night, he left the same message with the security detail. I have the medical logs. I have the flight records. Tell William, the truth is about to be exposed. By the 6th night, the message finally reached the Prince of Wales. William, who had spent years trying to protect his younger brother from the press, found himself staring at a file that directly contradicted everything he thought he knew about the birth of his nephew. He remembered the confusion of May 2019, the delayed birth announcement, the royal doctors being sidelined, the strange rushed nature of the public introduction. He recalled the awkwardness of his first meeting with Archie, allowed only a brief glimpse in a dimly lit room. At the time, he had put it down to Harry wanting privacy. But looking at the evidence Tom Bower had meticulously gathered, William began to see a very different picture. It wasn't about privacy. It was about a narrative carefully constructed to bypass the very laws that govern the British throne. Stay tuned to Royal Report Daily. We bring you the stories that matter. William retreated into his private office and began digging through the archives of 2018 and 2019. He searched for the signatures of the Queen's physicians, the medical professionals legally required to verify a royal birth to protect the integrity of the succession. What he found was a chilling void. A royal birth is traditionally accompanied by a formal medical bulletin signed by top-tier physicians and placed on an easel outside Buckingham Palace. For Archie, those signatures were missing. The high-risk pregnancy Meghan had spoken about publicly didn't appear to have a corresponding medical paper trail within the royal system. And there were records of private flights to the United States in the final weeks of the pregnancy, trips that would be nearly impossible for a woman in the final stages of a biological pregnancy to undertake comfortably or safely. The more William read, the more he understood that the rift between him and Harry was never just about personalities. It was about a fundamental breach of trust with the British people and with the institution itself. The confrontation came in a phone call that palace insiders say marked the definitive end of what the world once called the Fab Four. William placed the call late at night, his voice low and steady. Across the Atlantic, the California sun was setting over the Montecito hills. When Harry answered, He was met not with a brotherly greeting, but with a series of precise and deeply uncomfortable questions. William laid out the discrepancies calmly. He asked about the missing medical signatures. He asked why royal doctors were reportedly denied access to the delivery room. He asked about the surrogacy reports that Tom Bower was preparing to take public. The reaction from the other end of the line was immediate and explosive. Harry didn't offer facts. He offered fury. He accused William of being brainwashed by an outdated institution. He claimed his brother was trying to destroy Meghan the same way the press had destroyed their mother's happiness years ago. His voice was reportedly shaking with a combination of rage and genuine hurt. He insisted that Archie was his blood, and that any questioning of his birth was a direct attack on his family's safety. But William didn't flinch. He told Harry that as the future king, he could not protect a lie, even if that lie was being told by his own brother. The succession is not a family matter alone. It is a legal contract with the British public. If a child is not born of the body of the royal mother, they have no legal right to the titles or the place in succession that comes with royal birth. Harry's response was a sharp final click of the phone. The silence that followed was more deafening than all the shouting. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to Royal Report Daily for more exclusive investigations. In the days that followed, the Sussexes launched a massive PR counteroffensive. Meghan released a long, emotional statement through the Archwell Foundation speaking of systemic cruelty and baseless smears. She painted herself as a victim of a palace jealous of her freedom and afraid of her influence. On social media, her supporters went into complete overdrive, accusing William of being a bully and a hypocrite. The strategy was clear: frame the demand for medical proof as an act of violence and racism, making it socially and politically impossible for the palace to push further. But while the PR war raged online, the ground was shifting significantly in Britain. The media, no longer intimidated by quiet palace requests to back off, began analyzing old pregnancy photographs with unprecedented scrutiny. Medical experts were interviewed who noted that Meghan's physical recovery, appearing in high heels and a white dress just 48 hours after a supposedly grueling labor, was statistically extraordinary. Investigative journalists searched for the medical professionals who had supposedly assisted at the Portland hospital birth and found a wall of non-disclosure agreements that had reportedly cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to maintain. The shadows were becoming harder to ignore. The pressure reached a critical peak when William, acting with the quiet approval of King Charles, issued a formal 90-day ultimatum. This was not a suggestion. It was a legal directive delivered through royal lawyers. The Sussexes were given 3 months to provide a full, independent medical audit. This included DNA evidence from the child, sworn statements from the attending physicians present at the moment of birth, and the original hospital records kept under lock and key since 2019. If they failed to comply, the consequences would be severe and permanent. The king would issue a letters patent effectively removing Archie's royal status. He would lose his title. His place in the line of succession would be bypassed. All financial connection to the dukedom would be permanently severed. Don't miss a single update. Subscribe to Royal Report Daily right now. The ultimatum sent immediate shockwaves through the celebrity circles of Montecito. Powerful friends who had stood firmly beside Harry and Meghan began quietly reassessing their positions. Nobody wanted to be publicly associated with a scandal involving questions about the legitimacy of the royal line. Several high-profile advertising contracts reportedly went on hold, brands waiting to see whether the couple would actually produce the medical records. Because for the first time, there was a simple and straightforward way to end the entire drama. Just show the proof. If there was genuinely nothing to hide, why was a 90-day window being treated like a death sentence? Inside the Montecito mansion, the atmosphere was described by sources as one of extreme and suffocating paranoia. Harry was reportedly pacing constantly, checking his phone, feeling cornered between the brother he now felt had betrayed him and the wife who insisted they must stand their ground no matter what. Meghan remained calculated. She understood that producing the records might immediately end the crisis, but it would also mean the palace had won. It would mean they were still ultimately subject to the royal system they had so publicly declared they had escaped. But the alternative was the complete and total erosion of their royal brand, the very thing that gave them their commercial value in the American market. Without the titles and the royal connection, they were simply a wealthy couple in California with an increasingly complicated story to sell. Subscribe to Royal Report Daily and stay ahead of every development. As the 90-day clock ticked forward, a separate discovery added yet another layer of disturbing complexity to the already explosive situation. In early 2026, a 72-page legal file was reportedly circulated among senior palace officials highlighting an anomaly that had been hiding in plain sight for years. In the weeks following Archie's birth in 2019, a quiet and unexplained change was made to his birth certificate. The names Rachel Meghan were scrubbed from the document, replaced simply with the title Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. While Meghan's team claimed the palace itself had directed this change for protocol purposes, Williams investigators found no record of a similar change being made for Catherine or any other royal mother in the previous century. Why would a mother's birth names be removed from her child's most fundamental legal document? To the skeptics, this was never about protocol. It was about creating legal distance, a potential loophole that could be used to obscure the biological reality of the birth. This paper trail led Williams' team to a further and darker discovery. A series of financial transfers traced through a network of private companies. While royal births are traditionally handled through the NHS or the Queen's private medical fund, the audit allegedly uncovered hundreds of thousands of dollars paid to a private medical facility in the United States, months before Archie's birth. These payments were reportedly categorized not as prenatal care, but as consultancy and procurement, terms that in certain legal and medical contexts are associated with surrogacy arrangements. Rumors began to circulate that intelligence analysts had been quietly brought in to verify the origins of these funds, looking for any traceable connection between Sussex private accounts and known surrogacy clinics operating in California. If royal funds had been used to arrange and conceal a surrogacy, this would move the entire scandal from constitutional crisis into the territory of criminal misappropriation of sovereign wealth. Royal Report Daily, bringing you the truth behind every royal headline. Meanwhile, the constitutional weight of the 1701 Act of Settlement has become the primary legal weapon in William's arsenal. Most people view the Born of the Body clause as a dusty historical relic with little practical relevance in the modern world. But in 2026, it is the only thing standing between Archie and the crown. The law is absolute. To be a legitimate heir to the British throne, you must be the biological child of both royal parents, delivered in a manner that can be independently verified. The exclusion of surrogacy arrangements is not primarily about morality. It is about the verifiability of the bloodline that the British government is constitutionally sworn to protect. The pressure became so significant that several members of Parliament reportedly began drafting what was being called a succession clarification bill, a move that would formally remove both Archie and Lilibet from the line of succession if the DNA audit was not completed before the deadline. Inside the Montecito bunker, Meghan spent her days on the phone with high-powered human rights lawyers attempting to frame the DNA demand as a violation of international privacy law. But every legal expert they consulted delivered the same fundamental assessment. The rules for royals are different. When you accept a title and a place in the line of succession, you implicitly accept certain obligations of transparency that ordinary citizens do not face. Harry was reportedly torn between his loyalty to Meghan's position and the growing and agonizing realization that his son's entire legal identity was being erased in real time. Insiders whispered of explosive late-night arguments where Harry begged to simply produce the proof and end the nightmare, only to be met with Meghan's absolute resolve that surrendering now would mean losing everything permanently. Hit that like button and subscribe to Royal Report Daily right now. Back in London, the public mood had shifted decisively from curiosity to a demand for answers. In British polls conducted during the final weeks of the ultimatum period, over 70% of respondents supported William's demand for full transparency. The monarchy belongs to the people became the rallying cry across social media and newspaper opinion columns. Legal scholars appeared on every major broadcast network explaining with calm clarity that born of the body is not a suggestion or a historical preference. It is a formal legal requirement. If a surrogate was used, even if Archie is biologically Harry's child, the law as it stands is unambiguous. He cannot legally be in the line of succession. This was the reality that Harry and Meghan were fighting with everything they had to keep buried. The emotional toll on the wider family has been devastating. William is described by those close to him as mourning the brother he once had, understanding that even if proof is eventually provided and titles are maintained, the trust between them is gone and will not return. He sees Harry as someone who was willing to gamble the entire future of the monarchy for the sake of maintaining a short-term deception. King Charles is reportedly heartbroken, caught between his love for his younger son and his absolute duty as the defender of the institution. He spent decades preparing for the throne, only to have his reign defined by a public battle over his own grandson's birth. And in the middle of all of this sits Archie, an innocent child who has been turned into a pawn in a global power struggle that he had absolutely no part in creating. If his parents maintain their silence and he loses his titles, he will grow up knowing that his family's secrets cost him his entire royal heritage. If they provide the proof, he will still grow up in the long shadow of a war that has divided his family for generations. Either outcome carries a weight that no child should ever have to carry. As the final days of the 90-day ultimatum approached, the world was watching a global media split play out in real time. In the United States, major networks framed the entire crisis as a royal witch hunt, talk show hosts calling for an end to what they described as the archaic testing of a child's parentage. But across the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth, the narrative was entirely different, centered on the rule of law, the integrity of constitutional succession, and the fundamental question of whether the monarchy can survive in an era that demands complete transparency. William stands firm, his focus fixed on the long-term survival of an institution that has endured for 1,000 years. Harry and Meghan remain entrenched in California, gambling everything on a secret they appear to believe the world will never be allowed to fully see. The rift is no longer a family feud. It is a battle for the very definition of truth in the modern world. When the 90th day finally arrives, the silence of the past 7 years will either be broken by undeniable proof or confirmed forever by its continued absence. And that absence, in the eyes of the British public and the constitutional law that governs the throne, will speak louder than any statement, any interview, or any carefully crafted press release could ever hope to. The flame that Tom Bower ignited has grown into a firestorm, and when it finally burns through, what remains will reshape the British royal family in ways that will be felt not just in this generation, but for centuries to come. This has been Royal Report Daily, bringing you the complete truth from inside the palace walls. If this investigation gave you new perspective on the 2026 Sussex crisis, please hit that like button right now. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Share this video with everyone who is following this extraordinary story. Turn on your notifications so you are always first to know when our next exclusive report drops. Because the story of Harry, Meghan, and the future of the British monarchy is far from over. Royal Report Daily. Stay informed, stay connected, and we will see you in our next report.